Okay, so the purpose today is to really start talking through kind of the advanced features of InDesign. InDesign is a program that extends beyond just doing a single poster or an architectural layout. It's what the graphic design companies all use. It's also what all the magazine companies use. I had a friend, actually it was one of my wife's friends who ended up being my friend, who worked for Money Magazine in New York in the time when it used to be owned by Time. And I went and visited her in her office and had a good time kind of seeing how that whole production process worked. They used InDesign to do all the layouts for the magazine. So it is definitely a professional grade piece of software. And because of that, it's important to kind of understand the professional grade features that are basically in it or built into it. And so we want to kind of go through some of those features today. I want to talk a little bit about when we're creating the new document here, because there's a few options that start to be more relevant when we start to think about multi-page documents. So in this new document dialog box, again, our intent is to print because we're going to be building a print portfolio. Number of pages and start page don't really matter for right now because we can add pages later. This facing pages button does really matter, and that starts to be relevant when we're planning our portfolio. Let me see if I can get two examples of this right here. So I have two examples of portfolios from students that have since left. The first example is without facing pages, and that basically means that when we look at a spread, right, we have content on this page, but we have nothing on this page. Okay. When we move on to the next page, same thing. Content on one page, nothing on the back sides of each page, and that's consistent all the way through the whole portfolio. Facing pages, so when that checkbox is checked, we end up with content on both sides of a given page. If I can get these to separate. So we end up with content here and here, and when we turn the page, we end up with content across the spread. Right? Sometimes the content actually goes across the spread, as it does here. Sometimes the content is still on two separate pages, but they face each other. Okay? And so that checkbox becomes really important depending on what style portfolio you're trying to create. And that's really up to you. Generally, there are limits when you apply, say, to grad school or some kind of an academic setting where you might be allowed to have 12 sheets of paper. And if you want to include more content, you may end up having to do facing pages because you need the backs to include more content. When you're trying to apply for a job, there's very rarely a page limit or a page cap, so you can include a lot more information. Generally, it's a good idea to build your portfolio with a bunch and then cull it out. So you build your portfolio with all your content, right? And then when you need it for, say, grad school or something, or for Berkeley or whatever, you go back through and you edit out the pages that don't really matter, right? So more content is good at this stage. So don't be afraid to put it in as we go along. So I'm going to leave the checkbox for facing pages. The next thing is, what is my page size? We can customize this in terms of some examples you'll see are the actual 8.5 by 11 page. Some people chose to crop it down and make it square. So the size of the portfolio varies a little bit. It's kind of up to you as to what you want. I'm not going to specify what page size it needs to be. When you look through the stack at the back, you'll see that there's a bunch of different sizes, and it's really up to you what feels right for your work. So if I was customizing it, I'd specify it in the width and the height. For right now, I'm going to leave it as letter size, but I do tend to like landscape format, so I tend to like this way. That's a personal preference on my side. If you'd rather have it in portrait format, that's entirely up to you. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and use it in landscape format. The rest of this information really isn't important. I can specify that I want my margins all set to 0 just because I don't want to see those. So I just type in 0 there. The gutter and the rest of it is all fine. I'll go ahead and say OK. Okay, which gives me a nice first page. Now as I start to lay out this portfolio, I'm going to look at the pages window here. And you'll see that I have page 1 specified, and there's kind of a line that looks longer than the page itself. That's the crease, right? That's the binding of this particular set. And if I add a few pages, there's a little button for add pages down here. If I click on that, I'll add pages 2 and pages 3, and we can see that 1 exists by itself because it's the first page. So something like this would be the first page. Then we move on to page 2 and page 3, 2 and 3, okay, because they're facing pages, and consequently the numbering matches as well. Notice that that center line still exists. That's the binding line of these particular pieces. Okay, so I now have 3 total pages: the first page, the second page, and the third page. Right? I can create as many pages as I want. I can reorder the pages by dragging them around, and I'll show you some examples of that as we get a little bit further along, which is one of the great things about building a book in InDesign, is you can reorder and adjust things as necessary, as opposed to having static pages. So as I start to look at this, a couple things to note. Up above this pages section here, there's a section for what are called masters. And that's something that we haven't talked about yet, but it's going to become really important. And masters are for things that need to show up page after page after page. Can we copy and paste something on each page? Sure. But if we use masters, we can then apply it to a set of pages, make it the change. Let's say we wanted something was gray and we wanted to change it to black. Right? We can make the change on the master, and every page that has the master applied will have that change associated with it. So it's a really useful way of doing it. Generally, the A master is blank, so I leave it that way. But I'm going to work, and I'm going to try to drag this down a little bit so we can see a little bit more of the masters here. Right now, there is only an A master, but I can right-click and say New Master, and you'll see that I'll get a B master. Right? It's not based on any master. It's for 2 pages. It's letter sized. I'll go ahead and say OK. And you'll see that then B master is showing up here. Okay? Whatever is highlighted in this lightish blue color is going to be whatever the active page is that I'm working on. Okay? So if I were to double click, say, on page 1, I'm going to jump to page 1. Double click on page 2, I'm going to jump to page 2. But if I double click on the B master, I'm then going to be working on the B master. Okay? So let's say I wanted to start to create some examples. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to grab my portfolio from the back, and I'll rebuild that one as an example. Okay, so what I have in this portfolio, right, is a gray bar. Sorry, as it's falling apart here. Is I have a gray bar that goes across the top, and I have a little lightish, semi-transparent bar that runs down each side. Notice that that appears on every single one of the pages. Right? I'm going to recreate that as a master. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll create that rectangular bar that goes across these 2 pages. So let me go ahead and create a rectangle, which is right here. And I'm going to just click because I want to specify the size of this rectangle. I'm going to single click in the upper left corner right here. And it'll bring up the little rectangle dialog box. I want it to be a width of 11 inches, and I want it to be a height of 1 inch. And my units are still in picas, so I'm actually typing 1 space IN for inches. Right? And I'll go ahead and say OK. And that then gives me this rectangle. Now, unfortunately, this rectangle has an outline rather than a fill. I want it to have a fill instead of an outline. So I'll look here at my colors, and you'll see that I have the outline in black and no fill assigned to it. I'm going to click that little arrow to flip the colors so that I end up with a black fill and no outline. And then I'm going to specify the color that I want. So I'm going to say it probably needs to be about 60% gray or so. So I'm going to change the K value to 60, which is the black value. And then I'll say OK, and that gives me that kind of gray color that I was after. Now I do want to make sure that it fits nicely in the corner there. It looks pretty good. Don't know why it's a little short. Make sure it's the right size there. And I'm going to need this on the other page as well. So I'm going to copy it, Control C, and then Control V, and we'll drop it in right there on the other page as well. So now I have a gray bar that goes all the way across both pages. Okay? I like to treat each page separately in case I want to use it on one of the single pages. So if I wanted to use it on page 1 or something, I can use it. So instead of having one gray bar that goes across both pages, I do 2 separate gray bars. Okay? So if we go back to pages 2 and page 3, right now in the upper left corner and the upper right corner of pages 2 and pages 3, you see how it says A? Right? That A means that it has the A master applied, which doesn't have any gray bar on it. Right? The B master is the one with the gray bar. So I want to change the master that's applied to this page, and I could do that by right-clicking on the page and saying Apply Master to Pages. And I'm going to switch from the A master to the B master, and I'll go ahead and say OK. Now when I do that, we see that the letter in the upper left corner of page 2 has switched from being A to being B. Right? And we also notice that the page itself now has that gray bar running across the top. The other thing that lets us know that it was applied with a master is I cannot select the gray bar at all. It just exists. Okay? I would have to go back to the master to select it and manipulate it. Okay? The page 3 here didn't get the gray bar applied because it still is the A master, so I'm going to right click and apply master to pages, and we'll apply the B master to this page as well. So now pages 2 and 3 have that gray bar running across. Page 1 still is the A master, so it doesn't have the gray bar. So you can see how easy it is to customize which masters are applied to what page. Okay? So now let's go back to the B master, and this time I want to add that kind of semi-transparent gray column that goes down. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that, but I have to do it on the B master. So I'm going to double click on the B master, and I'm going to add in that semi-transparent gray column. So let me go ahead and click on the rectangle, and I'm actually going to switch my inches first because I need it to be a little bit cleaner. And I'm just going to do a single click, and this time the width I'm going to say is 2 inches, and the height is going to be 11 inches. I'll go ahead and say OK. There it is. Whoops, it was not the right height, so I'm going to have to adjust that. Should have been 8.5. Alright, something like that. Let me press Control 0 so I can see it. Now, I want that not to have, again, not to have a fill, or not to have a stroke, but to have a fill. So I'm going to flip the colors. It's kind of this dark gray now. Let's change it to, excuse me, it's black now. Let's change it to about 30% gray. That's not too bad. I'll say OK. So now I have it as a 30% gray. So the changes that I've done here automatically apply to pages 2 and 3. See how the gray bar is now shown up? Right? Likewise, if I were to move this one direction or the other, right, there it is, a 1/4 inch away. Hold on a second. That. If I were to move it, it would automatically update on pages, in this case just page 3 because that's the only thing that I have. If I want this to have a little bit of transparency to it, right, I can come over here to Effects, and I can change the opacity, and we'll maybe make it like 50% or so. And now it has a little bit of transparency associated with it as well. Okay? So if I go back to the pages, right, and we go to pages 2 and 3, once again those bars that I established are going to be there, but I can't select them because they're on the master itself. If I were to create more pages, right, let's create 4 and 5, they have the B master applied to them as well. If I were to make a change on the B master, right, let's say temporarily I move this up here, notice that it happens on both page 3 and page 5. Right, so the master again applies to all the pages. So let me jump back up to the master and let's continue working with this.
What was your measurement for that one?
This I did at 2 inches. Completely arbitrary. Again, just because I'm doing it this way doesn't mean that you necessarily should do it this way. You should create your own portfolio. I'm just trying to show you the example way of doing it, and it helps to have a print reference that I can work with. Okay, so I have those pieces applied. Unfortunately, however, if I go to start placing images I might not have these bars appear on top of everything else, and I'd really like them to appear on top of everything else. And we haven't yet covered much in layers, but the same way that Photoshop has layers, InDesign also has layers. And you'll see that Illustrator ultimately has layers as well. So the next little tab over from Pages is Layers, and you'll see that by default there's just layer 1, right? I generally like to have a layer that I call Master that is on top of all the other layers. So I'm going to create a new layer right there, and I'm going to rename this layer to be Master. I'll say OK. Notice that is on top of layer 1, which is going to be the primary content. I could rename layer 1 to be Content, if that helps. Right? So I have Master and I have Content from my layers. Now I'm going to jump back to my B Master, and I'm going to select each of those rectangles that I had. And I'm going to go back to the Layers menu, and I'm going to move these objects from the Content layer to the Master layer. And the way moving objects between layers works in both InDesign and in Illustrator is that once you have the objects selected, they're represented by that little blue box. You guys see that little blue box there? It's represented by that blue box, and if I drag that blue box from one layer to another, right, we'll change what layer they're on. Okay? The outline of the selected objects changes based on the color of the layer. So right here I have a red layer, here I have a blue layer. That changes which objects, or it lets us know that we did move the objects onto the Master layer instead of the Content layer. So before I move on, I'm going to go back to Content and make sure that's highlighted in blue, and then I'll continue on with my work on my pages themselves. Okay? So the next piece of this puzzle is a lot of times you'll have images that end up repeating, or sizes of images that end up repeating. So for example, there may be one portfolio page that has a full-size image on it. I can create a frame for that full-size image, and so I'll go to Create Frame, right, and I'll come over here, and maybe I want it to be full bleed, something like that, and I've created the frame. Right? And then maybe over here I'm going to create a couple smaller frames. By the way, you can adjust the size of a particular image. There. And let me go ahead and copy and paste this frame. I'm just creating a couple frames here to work together. Put this frame right there. Put this frame right there. Alright, so I've created these frames, right? They are on the B Master, and if we go to pages 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, we'll see that those frames are on those pages as well. I still can't select them, however. Okay, and that's one of the kind of the tricky things about InDesign, is that you can do the frames on a master, but when you go to place them, right, when you go to place an image, you can't actually select the frame first. You're going to have to just go to File and then Place, and we'll pick some images to drop in here. Let me get to my flash drive. Drop that image in. Notice that when I click on, there we go. When I click on, I should do that one more time. When I have the placed image loaded, I get a little preview of the image, right? And when I click on top of the frame, even though I can't select it, it will place it in that frame, or in that size. Notice also that because of the way that I set up my layers, the gray bar goes on top of my image, right? Because the image is on the Content layer. I can still use the Fitting command, so let me right click and go to Fitting, and we're going to fill frame proportionally, and we end up with the image itself. Okay. Let me go ahead and place a couple more in. I'll go to File and then Place. I'll place that one in there. Let me right click and go to Fitting, and we're going to fill frame proportionally, And there it is. Right? Likewise, I can place something in here. File, place. Let me pick a different one here. And I'll go to fitting. And we'll go to fill frame proportionally. Okay? So I'm dropping these images into those frames that I pre-created, all right, which make it really convenient down the road. Now, unfortunately, on pages 4 and 5, I have the same setup with the same frames. And it may happen that I don't want the same frames. I want to change the layout a little bit. It can be very, very helpful to just duplicate the master. Right? So let me come up here to the B master. I'm going to select both pages of it. I'll right-click and say Duplicate Master. Right? Now I have C master, and I'm going to change the orientation of these. So maybe on the C master, let's get rid of this. What's this one over here? This one there. These two. And I'll put those like that. Okay, so obviously I'm just changing up the layout a little bit. In this case, I have 4 images here and a single image to the left, right? If I come to pages 4 and 5, right now they have the B master applied. Let's change those to have the C master applied. And you'll see that my frames will change, but the rest of my content will stay the same. Okay? So it can be very helpful to set up different size frames and different layouts depending on what your standard layouts would be. And of course I can place in my objects. So let me zoom out a little bit so we can see it. Okay, so we have this placed in. Everything seems okay. Now we come to the part of text. And we can use text in the masters, right? But again, that text is going to repeat on every single page. So if we wanted text that is a title of whatever it is that we're trying to do, it might not be best to put it in the master because it's going to change on every page. Technically speaking, you can put a text box on a master, but you have to place the text in, so from a Word file or something. And a lot of times for titles, it's a little bit too much work to deal with the reference file into place, and a lot of times you just want to type in whatever the title would be. So what I would recommend in that case is to go ahead on the page itself. So we're on page 3 right now. Let me zoom in. And I'm going to go ahead and type that text. So let me go ahead and create a text box. I'm going to use the type tool to do it. And we'll draw a text box or something like that. Okay. And then we'll make a few adjustments. Now, I could set up paragraph styles and character styles for this to be able to use it. I can also just establish whatever I want first and then create the styles afterward. So let me go ahead and say this is photography. And then I might have a subcategory of or whatever. Okay. Now the sizes really aren't what I want, so let me go ahead and select them. And you'll see that, unfortunately, the content here was placed on the content layer, not on the master, so it's behind the gray bar. So I need to adjust that and place this on a different layer. So let me go to Layers, and I'm going to create a new layer, and we'll call this layer Text. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And I want that to be on top of the master, because the text is ultimately on the top. And I'll go ahead and take my object here and move it to the text layer, and we'll then see my text. Okay. So let me make a few more adjustments. I need to adjust the size and the font, etc. I have no idea what font I'm going to pick, but we'll go with an Arial for right now. It's not going to be Times New Roman. That I can promise you. And let's see here. Let's make this down a little bit more, something like that. I have it thin. I'm so used to my fonts on my computer that when I'm in the world of Windows, it throws me off. Okay, so I have something like this. Maybe that size needs to be adjusted a little bit. Obviously, I'm trying to create a nice hierarchy here between those two. I need a little bit of space on the top of this. And you know what? Let's take and make this italic as well. Of course, they don't have italics, so we can do our own version if we want, but I'll just leave it like that. Let me add a little bit of space before. Something like that. Perfect. Okay, so now I have this set up. Let me adjust it a little bit. Okay, so I'm ultimately going to want this to repeat on the next page. So what I'm going to do is I'll select my text here. I'll go to Edit and then Copy, and then I'll go to my next page. And when I go to page 5 here, instead of just saying Edit and then Paste, which will drop it in somewhere on the page, I'm going to say Edit, Paste in Place, which is going to put it in exactly the same place as it was on the previous page, which is really useful. So when you're working through text, paste in place is kind of critical to getting this together. Let me come back here, and we're going to do a little bit of a text description here. There is no requirement for this portfolio to have text or to have descriptions. A lot of times it's useful, however, to have these or to have space for them, because when you're describing an architectural project, studio project, it can be very helpful to be able to put a little bit of context about what is this about, what were you trying to do in your architectural design, that sort of thing. So let me go ahead and see if I can find.
Do we have different fonts to match the photos or whatever it is?
You can. It just depends on the overall look that you're going for. Do you want it to be consistent across everything? I would suggest making it consistent first, and trying to keep it as clean as possible first, and then departing from it after you get some of it set up. Right? You get the idea. Okay? So I can again copy this, Control C, and then go to page 5 and go Edit, Paste in Place. Right? And I can work with these examples or these texts, etc. Now, frequently there'll be something where you want to include like page numbers in a particular piece of this, and this is where InDesign starts to get really useful. That's something that you'll do using a master. And so I'm going to jump up to the B master here, and I'm going to establish a page number in the bottom of this page. And so let me go ahead and create a little text box, something like this. I'm going to be aligned to the right, and I'm going to change my font again. Like this. And if I were to put, for example, a page number, let's say I put 1 in, right? That 1 would then show up on every page, which is not what I want. So instead of doing that, I'm going to do what's called a special character. And so I'm going to select where I want this to be. Obviously, I specify the font and the size and that sort of thing. But I'm going to go up to Type, and I'm going to go to Insert Special Character. I'm going to go to Markers, and I'll say Current Page Number. And when I do that, it's going to put in the current page number. Now I'm on the B master, so it's going to put a B on that page. So it doesn't really look right when you first do it. However, when I jump to page 3, you'll see that that page number now says 3. When I jump to page 5, I'm on the C master instead of the B master, so let me go ahead and copy that page number. And actually, I think it needs to be bold and probably white. So let me change the font to be bold. Let me change the color to be white. All right, something like that. Now when we go to page, there you go, you can see it a little bit better. There it says 3. Okay. So let me go back to my B master. I'm going to select the text here. I'm going to copy, Control C, and go to page, go to the C master. I'm going to go to Edit, Paste in Place. Notice this time it says C instead of B. Well, you can't really see it, but I can see it on my screen. But when we go to pages 4 and pages 5, right, it's showing up there as well, which of course you can't see. So hold on a second, let me place some images. now you can see it. There's your little 5. Okay? So the advantage here is that if I reorder the pages, right, the page numbers are going to change. So if I wanted pages 4 and 5 to be pages 2 and 3, right, this is now page 3 instead of page 5. So it automatically populates the page numbers for us. So it's a really, really useful way of establishing page numbers. The other thing that we can do is we can establish what are called sections. And this is definitely on the more advanced side. But we could have something that says, I have these pages, they're all about photography, therefore I want a section to be devoted to photography. It's kind of like a chapter. Okay? And I can specify that by creating a section. So we'll call pages 2 through 5 photography. So let me go ahead and right click on page 2, and I can go to numbering and section options right here. And this is where I can say, okay, this is the start of a section. I can choose what page number I want it to start with. I'm just going to leave it as automatic because it's going to continue. I can choose what style. So if I wanted, for example, the style of the numbering to be in Roman numerals, I could switch to Roman numerals. That would be fine as well. But I can also specify what my section marker and what my prefix would be. So my section marker, I'll say, is photography. And I'll call the prefix a P, right? And I'll go ahead and say OK. And you see that this little triangle shows up here saying that I've started a new section. So there's a section here that's the initial section. This is the first section, which is photography, right? Now on my B master, and again this is the more complicated thing, I can specify right down where I had the page number. I can also specify that I want there to be a section marker. Whoops, sorry. So let me go up to layout, or excuse me, type, insert special character, markers, and I'm going to say section marker, right? And what that's going to do, and I'll put it in brackets, is it will fill in whatever section is currently being used. And I should copy this for the C master as well. There we go. And now when I look at page 3 here, it's going to say photography 3, right? Page 5, it's going to say photography 5, right? Now if I had another set of pages, right, let's move on, 6 and 7, 8 and 9, right? And I wanted this section to be architecture, I can right click and say numbering and section options, and I'm going to start a section here. My section prefix is A and the section marker is architecture. I can go ahead and say OK. And I need to place a few images so that you guys can see this. So let me go to File and then Place. Alright, so now on my sections, right, I started architecture here, so it says architecture 7, right, and architecture 9. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, so those are section markers, kind of like chapters, and it can be very, very useful in a long, complicated document to be able to specify that kind of stuff. And so those are the numbering and section options. So what I'm going to let you go from here is basically start building your first pages of your portfolio. I can almost promise you that whatever you start with today will change by the next time you work on your portfolio, because you'll get some new ideas and whatever. You do, however, have 2 assignments that can go into your portfolio. You have assignment 1 and you have or 101 and you have assignment 102. So both of those should be in it, and you should have at least 2 pages. I'm not asking you to create a title page or any kind of a page table of contents or anything yet, so chances are you're not going to start your work on page 1. You're probably going to start on page 2, right? If it's facing, otherwise you could technically start on page 1 if it's not facing pages. Okay? So I'm going to turn you loose to work. Please spend some time and look through all of the examples in the back, right? I will bring them back a couple more times in the semester, but today's a really good day to spend that time looking through them. Again, recognize that not all of them are necessarily A portfolios. I just grabbed the top of the stack. A lot of what's left are the pretty good ones, but again, there could be some other ones mixed in. But spend some time and have a good look at them. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Can you point out where the page number and section
Okay, sure. So when you're creating the text, right, we want the text to be whatever font and size you want it to be. Then it's under the Type menu, Insert Special Character, Markers, and it's going to be current page number or section marker, right? And so if I do current page number, it'll show up, and you can see it as a B. Notice, of course, that I could type page in front of it, B, or PB, or whatever combination you want. The B is going to be substituted for the page number, okay, because we're in the B master. That's why it says B right now. Okay? Any other questions? Nope? All right.